Yeah, put your... Hello, everybody. My name is Julie Walsh, and I'm a Chicago-based curator of digital art, and it's so nice to be back in my hometown. Thanks to Tezos and Blockhouse for hosting this panel today. I will make a few remarks to help us frame the conversation, and then introduce the panelists prior to getting into our discussion. Briefly, I've been in the art world for 40 years as an artist, gallery owner, and a curator. I'm also an art advisor for a Paris-based company art consortium that helps cultural institutions, galleries, foundations, and festivals integrate Web3 strategies. Digital art, and in particular, hybrid fusions with layerings of immersive technologies, or XR, allows cultural institutions and artists to connect at a personal level, to expand both their local and their global communities. Because at the end of the day, what is really important is the ability to talk to one another about art and life. I think that the layering of technologies, whether in full-scale live stream AR with projections, like in the immersive exhibition Enter the Plasticine with Tomoko Thiel and /P at the Meet Digital Culture Center in Milan, or synthetic corporal reality in the virtual exhibition space there, allows individuals to place themselves in history in a personal and intimate way. I am currently curating in the NFT Biennial using multiple modes of exhibition, including 45-foot screens, as well as individual viewing pods, monitors, and projections that will travel to 10 countries. So I think now is really the time to continue to brainstorm about how new media art, immersive technology, virtual worlds, and blockchain technology allows us access in alternative ways we are only now just beginning to understand. Access into communities that can support all aspects of art making, from the galleries, the cultural institutions, and the artists themselves. Access to anyone, regardless of race or socioeconomic status. Using blockchain technology combined with virtual worlds, we can create new patrons of cultural institutions and increase support for artists. I think here the key is really to talk about, can we create virtual and digital art exhibitions for all? And how can new media and phygital exhibitions help with cultural, societal, and political healing? The new territory opened up by these hybrid fusions of physical and digital offer cultural institutions the opportunity to create access past their walls. And despite digital art being around for 60 years, the possibilities of exhibiting art in a phygital way makes this a new world with new paradigms for art making, collaboration, and most important, connection. There's never been a more important time to be involved in the phygital, and I am excited to be discussing the many possibilities of digital art with our panelists today. And now I'd like to introduce the wonderful panelists here. Start with Christiane Paul, who is the curator of digital art at the Whitney Museum of American Art and professor in the School of Media Studies at the New School. She is the recipient of the Toma Foundation's 2016 Arts Writing Award in Digital Art, and she has written prolifically about digital art, media arts, and new media. Carlotta, over there, Carlotta Dochow. Carlotta is the director of Superblue with 10 years of experience in the contemporary art world. She's worked at Superblue as the company's first employee since its inception with Pace Gallery, building the project from an idea to a full-scale business with over 50 employees. At Superblue, she is focused on artist management, initiating and consolidating partnerships for the company, as well as leading on the company's Web3 strategy. And Elena Zabelev. Elena is the co-founder and CEO of CADAF and Digital Art Month. She is art and tech entrepreneur and has successfully built tools for artists, curators, and collectors in digital art and NFT space since 2017 with CADAF, the Digital Art Month, and the New Art Academy. So I think we'll just jump right into the questions now. I would like to start with Christiane. Could you tell us, and then of course I'd like all the panelists to respond, about your involvement with new media art, and specifically how your space has been addressing the Phygital. And in your case, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little overview, a quick lesson on what is the difference between digital art, new media, and Phygital, because I feel like some people in our audience may really enjoy that clarification.
Okay, thanks so much, Julie, and thanks everyone for coming. It's a great honor to be here with these great panelists. So I'll start with a little bit of history. The term new media art, I think, was first used very early in the 20th century when film came about, and then until the end of the 20th century really meant film video and other things, and suddenly it was co-opted by the digital and used for digital art as it gained more prominence in the 90s with net art specifically. I remember when I started at the Whitney in 2000, people kept sending me videotapes as the curator of digital art. And now I think more recently we have switched back to digital and to the core of the computable, and new media art has once again become a term for anything ranging from video to newer forms. The term Phygital, of course, combines the physical and the digital, and I'll get to that in a second. I think that's always been the core of exhibiting digital art, but of course with new forms of XR and mixed reality and NFTs, we're looking at new forms specifically. So I've been exhibiting digital art for decades, for around 30 years. I've been working both in the online space, curating artport.whitney.org, that's the Whitney's portal for net art, and also exhibitions in physical space. And what makes digital art so interesting to me is that, opposed to other art forms, is the one that is least defined. There may be installations that have very strict requirements for this many feet and here's the projector, etc. But most of digital art gets reinvented every time you put it into the physical space in new configurations. Very often works are never shown the same way twice. I think what we're seeing more lately is this extension into mixed reality. I'm curating a show that is opening at the Whitney in March, which really blurs the boundaries in that the works consist of AR, physical sculpture, and all of those components are combined. And I think what the challenge of blockchain and NFT art has been, you experience it largely on the screen and on platforms or viewing apps. And how do you bring that into physical space? As a curator, you always have to start with the work. What does the work require? It's not that everything looks best on a 45-foot screen, for example. It's always a matter of, should it be human scale? Should it be smaller? Should it be more intimate? How do we make those decisions? Should the art become an immersive environment? Is it best if it's separated on multiple screens? So all of those questions you ultimately can answer only specifically to a work and what the work needs and what its core concept is and how it should be translated.
And actually, I think it might be interesting if you mention Aurea Harvey's work because it's so relevant to this conversation.
Yeah, Aurea's work, which is also in the Whitney Museum's collection, will be part of the exhibition I just mentioned. And Aurea was, together with her husband, Michael Salmon, one of the pioneers of net art. Entropy 8 Super, Tale of Tales were their collaborative efforts, but she's also a sculptor by training, and her work and NFTs, which you've seen probably on various platforms, really cross that physical digital bridge. So you have sculptural work that is mirrored by a digital twin existing in an HTML environment, but then also accessible as an AR component. And what is very interesting about Oria's work, I think, is that she sees the digital file and the digital model as the work. The physical is a derivative of the digital work to her conceptually. And I think that's very interesting. It's not like, oh, here's the file from which a physical sculpture was generated, but she really places the emphasis on the digital, where her whole process of resculpting, remediating, refiguring takes place.
Thank you. And Carlotta, would you like to go next?
Yes, so in our case, so at Superblue, our relationship with new media art is that, first of all, we were born out of Pace Gallery, and Pace Gallery is a, let's say, quote unquote, traditional art gallery, as we call it in the NFT space nowadays, that has decades of experience selling object-based artworks. But they also, over time, have started representing some of the biggest names of the new media art space, James Turrell, Robert Irwin from the Light Art Movements, and more recently Team Lab, Random International, Studio Drift. There's a whole array of artists that that engage with all forms of media and digital art. And at first, at the very conception of what then became Superblue, it was the concept of how can we support these artists beyond the idea of selling objects. So Pace Gallery excels to this day in creating physical manifestations of digital art. How do we install a physical manifestation of a James Turrell in the collector's home and a Team Lab screen-based artwork? So it was really how to present digital art in a physical way to the highest standard. And I would say that Superblue is an evolution of that. It went beyond the idea of selling objects and into the realm of selling experiences. And we were really thinking from the start, how can we support these artists in a commercial way, because we are a commercial art gallery, to thrive and to be successful from the art that they are creating. And so at its very core, I think it was around 2016, we started exploring the idea of supporting these artists in the creation of site-specific commissions, be it in public spaces, in private collectors' homes, but really thinking about selling ideas instead of site-specific ideas instead of selling objects. That then evolved into the ticketed model, which is what we know today to be Superblue. We have, I invite you all to come and visit us, a big space here in Miami. And the idea there was that evolution of how can we continue supporting these artists. And we noticed that there's, new media art, again, comes in so many forms. And there's an element of new media art that is these large-scale immersive environments that it's very rare to find a collector to want to install that in their homes, but there's countless of people that will be interested in actually experiencing and paying to have access to that work. And so Superblue was born out of that concept, and the core idea is that we sell tickets and then we share the ticket revenue with the artists. So the artists no longer need to make those derivative. I mean, they can continue to do so, and in fact, we still continue to collaborate with Pace Gallery for that object-based aspect of these artists' practices. But in terms of the more immersive and kind of architectural scale installations, we support them there. And then I guess now, today, the next pillar or the next evolution to that exploration of how can we support these artists, how can we support this art form, is Web3 and all the things that, blockchain, NFTs, crypto, everything can offer.
I think it might be interesting if you mention your AeroBanquet project, because that's quite an interesting fusion of the physical with the digital or virtual.
Yes, exactly. And at Superblue, we're always trying to innovate in this way and really trying to find new ways of experiencing art. So right now we're very, very lucky to have a multi-sensorial installation at Superblue, which is a culinary experience in VR. called Aero Banquets. It's on, I think, this week and maybe a bit longer. So please, if you have the time to get a ticket to that, I did it the other day and it was really fantastic. And the idea is that it combines not only the visual, audiovisual an audiovisual engagement, but beyond that, also a culinary exploration. So it's very exciting.
Thank you, Carlotta. Elena.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here today. Wonderful panelists. Thank you for inviting me. So I run CADAF, which is a Krypton digital art fair. We also do festivals, augmented reality festivals called Digital Art Month. And also do a lot of different educational initiatives. So CADAF was actually started in 2019 out of realization that there was no art fair that would focus entirely on digital art. And here we are in 2022. Well, it's still a very rare thing. And the more I go to the art fairs, the more I see how many beautiful digital artists that are coming to the space, the more I feel the need for digital art fairs, really. Because, I really don't believe that digital art should be experienced only on the computer screen or on the phone screen. And I mean, it's so great that we have wonderful museums where you can experience digital art properly, or galleries, but still, the art fair is a completely different animal, and I feel like, in digital art space, it's really, really needed. When we launched CADAF, we were thinking of different models, whether to work with only galleries or only artists. And at the end of the day, we decided to be very open, so we are working with a lot of individual digital artists, but also with the galleries, also with the foundations, with the artist residences, with pretty much very, very diverse producers of digital art. We also sometimes even have marketplaces acting as galleries and coming, to the fair, presenting curated selections from their works. So for me, Phygital is kind of the essential part of what we do, is because, because of different reasons. First of all, the mediums that we show also are very, very different. Sometimes we have digital installations that actually have physical digital sculptures inside the fair, and then they have also some virtual element. But even the most digital art becomes physical in a physical space. So I think that that's really, really important. For the Digital Art Month, it's actually an augmented reality mostly festival, so we show a lot of augmented reality works in the public spaces in different cities. We so far have worked with New York, Miami, and Paris, and we love doing these events. We collaborate with the city to place augmented reality filters, actually QR codes that lead to augmented reality filters in the public locations. And it's a very democratic way to enjoy digital art. We always, so far, one of the rules has been to have the filter either on Instagram or on Snapchat, just because the audience already has it on their phones, and so they can just, activate the filter and enjoy it, which I think is great. So, yeah.
Thank you. That was a very helpful answer. Let's move on to our next question. We'll start with Christiana again. Have you noticed a difference since the pandemic in terms of audience responses to digital, physical, and the Phygital art? And do you think the pandemic has influenced the way that digital art is seen today?
I think it definitely has in so many different ways. First of all, the world kind of moved online over the course of the pandemic. And it felt like a flashback to the 90s, because many people for the first time were struggling with the kind of technological connectivity that we were struggling with on a different level, of course, in the 90s. See you, see me applications, what does it mean to live and exist in online spaces and communicate with people. So all of that was very familiar to many of us who have worked in this field. And I thought that was one of the silver linings, that people got more exposed to that kind of mediation and it became normalized more, which I think is necessary in this day and age in terms of accessibility. And at the same time, it also helped with the acceptance of digital art. Yeah. Where I've seen a lot of confusion is in the space of exhibition and what that means. If I, a decade ago, would have said, oh, I'm curating an online exhibition, most people would have assumed, oh, it's an exhibition of net art that lives on the web. But as everything moved online and exhibitions were represented online, suddenly an online exhibition could mean anything. A museum exhibition in a gallery space that is represented on a website or in a virtual space on Mozilla hubs. So suddenly that became a very unstable term, and we have this categorical instability of online exhibitions and what they mean. And I think that has persisted. There's something interesting to it, but I believe there's still a lot to sort out. And also figuring out what is actually the best way of showing an exhibition and for what purpose. You suddenly have exhibitions that are mixing documentation of physical work in online spaces together with net art, and it becomes highly confusing. I think most people are, of course, statistically speaking, experiencing art online these days, more so than in gallery spaces. But I think we still need to maintain the essentials of the medium and of the artwork and what it wants to say and in what materiality it exists, and be very careful about representations. Another thing that the pandemic has changed in the exhibition space is, once again, this trend for skeuomorphic representation, that is representation of gallery spaces per se. And I think there's something to be said for replicating a physical gallery space if you want to give an audience an idea of what a show installed in physical space looks like. But other than that, it's super exciting to invent virtual spaces for showing the art here and give up on all of the constraints that we're experiencing in the physical world. And the same thing happened in the 90s when people tried to just replicate what the physical space looks like. I don't think there has to be a digital Whitney that looks like the physical Whitney in the metaverse, but there's a lot of potential in playing with new paradigms. So I think we're very much still at the beginning of working in all of those areas. And I hope that most gallery spaces, art institutions, museums will continue to stay committed to virtual programming.
And I think just responding to what you were saying, you know, the fascinating part of this is that digital art can be site-specific and has always been site-specific. And I think that's important whether it's a virtual exhibition, you know, really taking into account the art itself and what is best for the art in that virtual space, physically, but in that virtual space. Carlotta, would you like to respond? Has the pandemic changed at all Superblu's?
Yes, actually, it's important to note that Superblue was conceived, let's say, pre-pandemic. So the concept of Superblue was cemented in late 2019. So obviously we didn't know what was going to happen, but then the pandemic hit. We had to delay the opening of our first space here in Miami by a year. So we officially opened our doors in May of 2021. And what was interesting is that at first we always knew, because we were dealing with this type of art, that there was going to be a digital strategy and a digital component to what we were doing, but we didn't think it would happen this fast. And then when we were all sitting at home, being productive online for the first time and versus how we were used to working offline, we had to, you know, fast track what we were going to do. And so I really agree with what you were saying earlier. It's not about replicating what we visit physically in the digital realm. It's about how they can complement each other, and that's the big problematic that we are working on. And there is obviously an educational component that comes with digital. There's also a component of people that aren't able to physically visit. How can they also, enjoy the content that is produced and the art that's produced by our roster of artists? And so we are building an application, which, I mean, it was always in the plans, but it was definitely fast-tracked. And our first digital native experience is an experience by one of our star artists, actually one of my personal favorite artists, JR. And it's definitely a continuation of it. He's an artist that is very much rooted in the physical. He does public artworks worldwide using paper and glue, as he says it. And this AR artwork that we've done, actually in collaboration with Niantic, who's the company behind Pokemon Go, is very much linked to his physical art and is an evolution of that. And we're hoping to launch that in officially, a beta version is out there, but officially launch it in early next year.
Thank you. Elena?
Yes, so, when pandemic hit, we were supposed actually to go with our art fair to Paris, to a physical location, and we weren't able to. But we were really eager to do something, and we worked with the company to create the virtual art fair. And I remember the thinking that exactly we didn't want something that would exactly recreate either an art fair or be just like a 2D sort of environment where you view the art. So we were trying to come up with a space that would be innovative and where people can actually see the movement of one another and kind of have the interaction happening as if you are in the real space. And I think that was really great. At the same time, we also started Digital Art Month. So one of the reasons why we started Digital Art Month, this augmented reality festival, is because we couldn't host in-person events. So we wanted to place the work somewhere where people can actually enjoy them. And especially this first iteration of Digital Art Month in New York, it was really, really great because, in New York, everything was closed, and then all of a sudden people could walk around and enjoy the art. So, I mean, how it changed I just see a lot more art since the pandemic. I see a lot more digital artists. I see a lot more willingness for the artists to experiment. And of course, with all the market developments that were happening during it became sort of a push. So now, let's see what happens post-pandemic.
So I think my next two questions have to do with the future and what the three of you are really excited about. Specifically, are there areas within new media or digital art that you think will become increasingly important in the future, such as immersive art, XR like VR and AR, robotics, video games, biotechnology, 3D printing, generative art, quantum computer art, and computer animation? But what are you most excited about?
Well, I always don't like to single out one specific aspect. In general, I would say one thing I'm grateful for when it comes to NFTs and blockchain art is that they raised so much awareness of generative art, which literally is centuries old. But it's super nice, I think, that now we see more interest in the generative potential of digital art. So that's one thing. Then the areas that definitely have been very much on the rise and where we've seen increased activity is VR, which is in its third phase. AR has become much more normalized. So I believe we're going to see a lot more experimentation in those realms and in mixed reality in general. I think in the past there sometimes may have been a tendency to place too much emphasis on the separations of worlds. Phygital is, of course, exactly the opposite thereof. And what will really happen more and more, I believe, is this overlap and interplay between the two of them. And of course, technological developments also always come in waves. Another area which has seen an explosion is AI, of course, and I think we're just at the beginning of that. Oh, and I want to return for a moment to VR and those environments. So we're now seeing more multi-user virtual reality spaces and experimentation with that. And I think we're just at the very, very beginning of looking at really narrative, the emergence of more narrative forms and interactive narrative forms within VR spaces. So I hope that there will be a lot more of that in the future. I would also say no matter what the status of cryptocurrencies is, the blockchain is here to stay, definitely. And will be part of the future and is an interesting medium for artists to play with. And one thing I had been asking myself when the whole NFT hype, blockchain hype happened was, whatever happened to quantum computing? Because that was supposed to be the next big thing, and it was completely phased out by the focus on Web3, and now we're seeing more attention placed on it again, because the networking in quantum computing also has made rapid progress. And it's very interesting for me to see how the blockchain might intercept or how there might be an interplay between the blockchain and quantum computing in the future and what form that will take.
Thank you. Carlotta?
Yeah, I must say I'm excited about all of the above. I wouldn't be able to single one art form out, but I wanted to just develop on what Christian was saying about how Web3 has given or provided this awareness of generative art that was that has existed forever. But I think it's not just awareness, but it's also financing. And what's really interesting about Web3 is that it creates these possibilities for artists to have access to funds, because realistically, new media art, digital art, all these art forms are incredibly costly. And not only costly, they take time. And so there's, with the artists that I work with, there's a lot of research and development, hours of research and development that go into creating these unique experiences. And with Web3, there's new kind of commercial monetization business models that are given to artists to be able to continue innovating and developing. And so I think that there's going to be, thanks to this new form of monetization, there's going to be a lot more access to artists from all, from the most established to more emerging, to continue innovating. And I think that's going to lead the way to so many new and exciting art forms that we can't even think about today, but that are going to hopefully blow our minds.
Yeah, and that's very helpful, because you remember when we started the conversation, I was talking about access and community building, and the possibilities of Web3 in these areas are phenomenal. Elena, would you like to respond quickly? Because I'm hoping we could still perhaps get a Q&A in.
Yes, sure. So one thing that comes to mind is also collaboration. So I'm excited to see more collaborations between traditional and digital artists, between traditional institutions and new media, more emergent maybe artists. In general, when I see this going on, there is always something super cool and exciting happening. So I think that Web3 space is just, it's a greatest platform for collaborations, and I'm excited to see more of that.
I just want to mention one final thing as well. I agree with everything that has been said. I think there are still huge issues when it comes to access. Not everybody has access. It's not quote-unquote democratized space in any way. We're seeing once again the same mechanisms replicated in Web3 that we have seen in the commercial art world. Definitely more people having access to selling their work, but it's not at all that the playing field has become even in any way. So there's still a lot to do on that front.
I just want to add something. I think you're right, and I completely agree. I think in terms of access to artists more broadly, the spectrum of artists, I don't think we're there yet at all. We're very much replicating. But I do think that if we're comparing art forms, I think, Web3 has really put new media art, digital art, almost at par with more traditional art forms, be it painting, be it sculpture, et cetera. And so there is that equalization in terms of media and form of artistic creation, but I do agree there's a lot of work to be done in terms of access.
Okay, I think we have time for some questions.
Does everyone on this panel have 3D goggles?
Yes, I've had for a long time.
No.
Yes.
Do we have to pass a micro? Yeah, okay.
I have a microphone. I was interested to hear more about quantum computing. I am aware of quantum computing as far as large machines in those labs you read about when they're first launching these ideas, but I want to hear more about how it might be used in art as a material for artists and how accessible it might be for individual artists, what it means for artists. And I guess as someone who's interested in VR, would it be possible to ever have an overlap? I have no clue. I'm just asking the question. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm actually asking myself that too. So to some extent, artists working with quantum computing today are, of course, relying on labs, on industry, making it available to them. Like with every new form, in the beginnings, artists have to go into the labs, work with corporations to get access. What I'm waiting for, and honestly have not seen yet, is art that really reflects also on the conceptual core of quantum computing. There are artists working with quantum computing, but honestly, if you look at the work, you would never know visually that it uses those technologies. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how artists conceptually might engage with interpolation and all of those interesting entanglement, exactly, and all of those interesting things. And yes, I believe there could be intersections with VR, but we haven't seen it yet.
I have a question on scenography. I mean, we've seen many NFT exhibits in galleries that is like literally a Best Buy store with screens after screens after screens, and it's almost like we forgot that in new media art there is a lot of research on scenography. So I'm wondering what you think we can do to go beyond the Best Buy effect on the screens.
Well, it's really I would also love to hear from you, but it's a curatorial question. This is the question every curator faces when you're bringing a digital work into physical space. When I did an exhibition called Programmed at the Whitney Museum a few years ago, together with our conservator, Carol Mancusi-Ungaro, and we actually reconfigured many of the online pieces, the artists creating new interfaces, revising interfaces for bringing the work into space, and Carol has called that experiential conservation in terms of that translation. So if you have an NFT or NFTs, looking at the core of the project, what is it about? What does it want to say? And translating that into space, whether that's immersive, projection-based, the arrangement of screens, if that is the answer. But I think there's nothing more boring than, as you said, putting up the Best Buy store and tiles of just digital images. What's the essence of the work? What is it about? How can you translate it? And that's what curators are doing with every digital work.
Yeah, I think the root of the problem is the fact that there was this whole discourse last year about death of the middleman, and the artists can have access to their own collectors, but actually the reality is that the art world has existed for thousands of years, and there are structures in place that support artists in artistic creation and presentation, be it curators, which are incredibly important, critics, and even art dealers. All this whole ecosystem is there for a reason. And so I think the NFT art space just grew very quickly and in this kind of hype motion. And I do think that over time, gradually, these actors are also going to be present in the NFT art space. There's going to be way more, crossover between what is now called the trad art versus the NFT art space, which I personally find ridiculous. And once we start, bridging that gap, which is what I hope we're all doing here in a way, we're gonna be able to see much better quality.
And a very brief response, because we're almost out of time, but for the NFT biennial that I'm one of 10 curators, it was really difficult choosing the artwork for this because we needed artists who were conversant and fluent not only on the blockchain with their projects, but also across different modes of exhibition, because it needed to be commissioned for a 45-foot screen, very intentionally and thoughtfully, as well as there were then representations with monitors and projectors and individual viewing pods. So it was really required a lot of fluency in some ways across mediums. And I would just like to wrap up saying what a delight it has been to share with you our ideas on physical and digital and the Phygital with all of my wonderful panelists. And thanks so much for your attention.